Here's a model of learning that you may not have heard of before. MUD. Very easy to remember though. And essentially it explains the key processes involved when we learn something. As we move from being a novice, which we may be in terms of edutech tools, hopefully not too much of a novice, to becoming an expert, which many of us may not be, and in fact is anybody. So, how do we move along this competency continuum? Well, firstly, we've got to take in some key information about it and put it in our memory systems. Then we have to make connections, think about it in order to build understanding. In other words, we need to understand what edutech tools are and what they can actually do and how they work. And then we have to do the hard work, and that's put it into practice, good old-fashioned doing. And this requires something called deliberate practice that we'll look at very shortly. However, none of this is going to happen if we don't have the desire. And that's the MUD model. If we're not interested in using edutech tools, then we're not going to do any reading, any thinking, and any practice, and we're not going to get any good at doing it. So let's explore these terms in a little bit more detail. And here we are. Memory, understanding, doing, and design. As you can see, memory and understanding very much bound up with taking in information, thinking, and storing knowledge in long-term memory, which we'll look at in a minute. And the doing is the practical aspects. We have to do plenty of practice to get good at something. And the desire, that's to do with our motivation, our beliefs about learning, our beliefs about ourselves. And do we have the persistence to keep learning, especially when it gets a little bit difficult? So you can say to learn well is to mix MUD well. Let's explore memory and understanding and doing and desire in a little bit more detail. Okay, now memory is quite a complex process, but it is the central process in learning. Often people say, oh, memorizing bad. Well, if they say that, they really don't understand how the system works. In fact, it's the long-term memory system that is the most important in all aspects of learning, because once we've really learnt something well, it's actually in our long-term memories, and that's what makes people experts. However, there's some real important things about memory, and that is when we take in information from our senses, from the environment, it goes into working memory. And this is a really important cognitive structure because it organizes information, and if we can organise that information well, especially if it goes in a meaningful, organised manner, it's going to be much easier to transfer into long-term memory. However, it has a limited capability, which is now quite common knowledge. 7 plus or minus 2 bits. Different scientists disagree, some think it's less than that. But the basic point is this, that it will not take in large amounts of information in one go, especially if that information is new. And what that means in terms of learning, whether it's teaching or dealing with administrative communication and technology systems, if there's too much information being pushed on an individual to learn, it will not be processed easily. It's something that is often referred to as cognitive overload. So it's tremendously important that as we learn and as we help other people to learn, that we put information into manageable chunks and there is sufficient time for rehearsal and review so that that information can connect with other information in long-term memory. And that's how we build a solid understanding. Another interesting thing about our memory systems is that working memory and long-term memory are very integrated. As we approach new problems in our working memory, we immediately open up our long-term memory. And that's why experts are so good at solving problems, because they don't have to do too much thinking very often because the answer's there in their long-term memory systems. So lots of implications of memory. Chunk information up, avoid, where possible, cognitive overload, and ensure that the systems that we're using work with our memory system and don't create problems for them by creating cognitive overload. Now, the doing is about deliberate practice and feedback. It's not just practice as such, because we may practice and practice, but be learning the activity badly. And what happens is we get very good at doing something badly. So deliberate practice is where we carefully plan what we want to improve and do it in manageable steps. And where necessary, get help from a teacher or a mentor. And it does involve much repetition. And that's really important for this course, because in using these e-tools, you will have to go through this learning process. You will have to learn stuff, think about stuff, build understanding, and then do some deliberate practice. It's unlikely that you'll use a tool very effectively on the first occasion. And that's true with everything we do. And that's where good feedback is really useful, because that way we can check what we know and what we don't know and what we need to do to fill that gap in. So finally, in this screencast, how can EduTech tools enhance design? And a lot of that is about intrinsic motivation. Well, the answer's in the Friedrich Nietzsche quote, against boredom, even God struggle in vain. And that's because that as human beings, we seek novelty and variation. And certainly EduTech gives us the opportunity for more variation. From a teaching point of view, we have so many opportunities to bring in lots of different resources, videos, podcasts, social collaboration with other people, etc., etc. So we can mitigate the boredom factor. And also, if you look at that cartoon, which is kind of amusing, is that because we can hyperlink so much information together and create so much communication and collaboration, we can cater to people with different levels of competence. And it's not a situation that we serve up something that is pretty good in this caption for the monkey, but I think that elephant and the seal are going to struggle climbing up that tree. So in this screencast, here's some idea about the learning process. And here's some key things to bear in mind when you think about your EduTech tools. Are they going to support the way we learn and meet the goals and challenges we're trying to meet in our work context?